On the day He Yunting received the August 1st medal, he made a heartfelt public declaration of love to his accompanying military doctor, Bai Pianran, in front of the entire nation. If it weren't for Pianran, I would have perished in the sea storm long ago. She is the most important person in my life. Meanwhile, his lawful wife, Song Xinyue, lay on her deathbed, her health broken from years of tirelessly caring for his parents and raising their children. It never occurred to her that after 20 years of relentless toil, she wasn't even worthy of a single word of thanks from him. Her son's words were the final straw that broke her. "Mom, look how perfect Aunt Bai and Dad are together. You should step aside and make room for her sooner rather than later." Song Xinyue, overwhelmed by fury and regret, drew her last breath. When she opened her eyes again, she had returned to the eve of He Yunting's departure for coastal defense duty. In this life, she refused to be the anonymous one left behind to hold down the fort. She was going to chase her dream of flying. 1981, Southwest Military District Air Force Pilot Selection Center. The commanding officer looked at Song Xinyue with a stern expression. "Comrade Song, first of all, congratulations on passing the assessment and becoming our nation's first female pilot. However, being an Air Force pilot is no child's play. Even after selection, you'll face long and arduous training. Are you absolutely sure you're ready for this?" Song Xinyue understood the commanding officer's hesitation, and a resolute light shone in her eyes. "Sir, women hold up half the sky. I, too, wish to contribute to our nation's air power. What's more, my late father was among our country's first fighter pilots. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I will never give up halfway." The commander was convinced and nodded in approval. "Well said, Comrade Song, it's just that." The senior officer seemed to recall something and asked hesitantly, "In 15 days, your group of pilots will be sent to the capital for training, but Yunting is about to be stationed at the South China Sea Coastal Defense. That means you'll be separated. Does Yunting agree to this?" Song Xinyue's expression darkened, a bitter smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "He probably can't wait for me to be gone, in his past life. After all, He Yunting gave the sole spot for accompanying family to the military doctor, Bai Pianran. In the 20 years that followed, he only returned home twice. The first time was for his son's coming of age. The other time was when he was awarded the August 1st medal. Song Xinyue had always believed that after 20 years of single-handedly holding the family together so He Yunting could focus on coastal defense, her exhaustion and illness would at least earn his acknowledgement. She was certain that, no matter what, He Yunting would mention her name during the commendation ceremony. Yet, to her dismay, He Yunting had eyes only for Bai Pianran, completely forgetting all her sacrifices. Even the son she had raised by herself felt that He Yunting and Bai Pianran were a better match, resenting her for being in the way. In that moment, Song Xinyue realized just how pitiful her entire life had been. For the sake of this family, she had abandoned her dreams and toiled away her whole life. Yet all she reaped in the end was her husband's estrangement and her son's disdain. Fortunately, she was granted a chance to start over. In this life, she would be an eagle soaring through the sky, living life to the fullest. After submitting the application form, Song Xinyue hurried towards the compound on her old-fashioned bicycle. As she turned the corner, she bumped right into 3 people coming the other way. He Yunting and Bai Pianran were holding their son Zhozhou's hands, one on each side. Zhozhou was chattering away about something, and Bai Pianran smiled as she ruffled his hair. He Yunting watched the two with a gentle expression, a soft smile in his eyes. The 3 of them looked just like a happy little family. The moment He Yunting's gaze fell upon her figure, his expression darkened instantly. "Where have you been? How could you leave Zhozhou alone at the clinic for an 4 drip? He's only 6 years old." Zhozhou, who had been talking excitedly to Bai Pianran, immediately stopped. He turned his face away and let out a disdainful snort. Song Xinyue clenched her fingers tightly, suppressing the ache in her heart. "Zhozhou didn't want me to stay with him. He said he only wanted Dr. Bai by his side." In their past life, even before Bai Pianran left with He Yunting, Zhozhou had always been especially fond of her. Song Xinyue simply thought it was because Bai Pianran was kind to children that Zhozhou wanted to be around her. Little did she know, what Zhozhou truly wanted was for Bai Pianran to be his mother. This time, he wouldn't have to wait in anguish for her to pass away. In 15 days, his wish will come true. Hearing this, He Yunting's expression didn't soften. Instead, his brow furrowed. "That's just a child's angry words from a tantrum. Are you really going to take that seriously?" Song Xinyue's gaze fell on Zhozhou, who was tightly clutching Bai Pianran's hand. The child's young face was full of wariness towards her. His own mother, as if he feared she would snatch him away from Bai Pianran the very next second. In her past life, She had never paid much attention to the dependence Zhozhou expressed towards Bai Pianran in his words. She believed that no matter what he said, in his heart, she, his mother, was the most important, but now she understood that in a child's world, there is no such thing as saying one thing and meaning another. What they say comes straight from the heart. Bai Pianran crouched down, gently pinched Zhozhou's little cheek, and said with feigned seriousness, "Zhozhou, you mustn't be angry with mommy, okay? Mommy works very hard to take care of you." Zhozhou pouted in grievance, his tone brimming with reluctance. "But I wasn't just saying it in anger. I just want you to stay with me, not mom." Seeing his son's tear-filled eyes, He Yanting furrowed his brow, his gaze towards Song Xinyue filled with displeasure. "What kind of mother are you? You're a complete failure. You should pay more attention to your son." Zhozhou chimed in eagerly, "Dad's right. Mom doesn't care about me at all." Hearing the father and son echo the same sentiment, Song Xinyue felt a tightness in her chest, a self-mocking twist to her lips. Ever since Zhozhou was born, she had been raising the child entirely on her own, attending to every single detail of his life. When he was sick, she was the one who stayed up all night by his bedside. For his birthdays, she baked the cake herself. When he was a picky eater and undernourished, she was the one who racked her brains to turn the foods he hated into new dishes. Every single detail made it clear she had poured an immense amount of effort into Zhozhou. Yet, in the end, in the eyes of that father and son, she had somehow become a failure of a mother. Think whatever you want, she was leaving in 15 days, and she didn't want to get into another argument with that father and son. He Yanting was just about to lose his temper and berate Song Xinyue for her indifferent attitude when Bai Pianran grabbed his sleeve. She spoke with a guilty expression, "Brother Yanting, this is all my fault. Please don't argue with your wife." The anger on He Yanting's face vanished in an instant as he spoke softly to comfort Bai Pianran. "This isn't your fault. I should be thanking you for helping take care of Zhozhou." Zhozhou also threw himself into Bai Pianran's arms. "Auntie Pianran, I was telling the truth. My teacher says children mustn't lie, and I promise I wasn't. It's all mom's fault. You're the best person in the whole world." He Yanting's expression darkened as he shot a glance at Song Xinyue, then turned and walked off in the opposite direction. "Pianran, Zhozhou, and I will see you home first." Zhozhou excitedly took both of their hands. "Let's go." Song Xinyue stood rooted to the spot, watching the three happy figures recede into the distance, her heart already brimming with bitterness. These were the husband and child for whom she had sacrificed her entire previous life. Since they so clearly despised her, this time, she would let go. As the three figures faded into the distance, Song Xinyue turned a corner on her old-fashioned bicycle and arrived at the marriage registration office. "Hello, comrade, I'd like to file for divorce." Divorce was exceedingly rare in those times. After repeatedly confirming her intent and seeing the unwavering resolve in Song Xinyue's eyes, the clerk finally handed her the divorce application form. "Once both spouses sign here, we can proceed with the divorce formalities." Song Xinyue carefully tucked the document away and returned to the compound. He Yanting and his son hadn't returned yet, so Song Xinyue went into the kitchen, made dinner for one, and ate it straight away. The father and son only came back as she was washing the dishes after finishing her meal. He Yanting looked at the empty dining table and asked instinctively, "Why isn't there any dinner made for us?" Song Xinyue glanced at Zhozhou's round belly and replied calmly, "Didn't you already eat at Dr. Bai's place?" Zhozhou and He Yanting were notoriously picky eaters. Even when treated to a meal out, they'd barely touch their food. Song Xinyue had spent a long time experimenting with recipes to finally figure out the flavors they liked. No matter how late they returned, Song Xinyue would always have a meal for three waiting for them. But now it seems, their picky eating habits simply vanished when they were at Bai Pianran's house. Well, of course, she was someone both father and son held dear in their hearts. Naturally, their appetites were hearty when dining with her. He Yanting's expression froze for a moment, and he cleared his throat lightly to explain, "We only stayed because we couldn't bring ourselves to turn down Dr. Bai's invitation." Zhozhou patted his round belly and muttered under his breath, "Auntie Pianran's cooking is so delicious. I wish I could eat her food every day." Song Xinyue's hand stilled, and a profound weariness settled over her entire being. After quickly tidying up the kitchen, she gave herself a hasty wash and climbed into bed. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, a pair of large hands drew her into a warm embrace. "There's something I'd like to discuss with you." He Yanting's deep voice jolted Song Xinyue instantly awake. Before she could get a word out, the man continued on his own. "Next month, I'm being deployed to the South China Sea for coastal defense. There's only one spot for a military dependent, and I want to take Pianran. As for Jojo, he's still young and won't count against the quota. I'll take him along too. You stay here in the compound and look after my parents for me. I'll come back for you once I'm settled in the South China Sea. Song Xinyue's nose stung, and her fingernails dug unconsciously into her palms. It was less of a discussion and more of an indisputable command. In her past life, He Yanting had said the exact same words. At first, she couldn't understand why the military dependent spot was given to Bai Pianran, when she was clearly his wife. Later, He Yanting explained that the garrison was stationed on a remote island with no doctor, and the soldiers there often suffered from illnesses, which was why he intended to bring Bai Pianran along. After a fierce internal struggle, Song Xinyue finally agreed, but on one condition: Jojo must stay. Life on the island was harsh. And with He Yanting preoccupied with his garrison duties, she worried he couldn't properly care for Jojo. Seeing her unwavering resolve, He Yanting had no choice but to relent. Before departing, he promised he would return for her and their child, yet that wait turned out to last a lifetime. In the end, even Jojo blamed her for keeping him and his father 1,000 miles apart, and for taking up the place that should have been by Pianran's. Looking back now, if the island was short of doctors, the military could have requested one from higher command. Why did He Yanting have to use a military-dependent slot to bring Bai Pianran along? It was simply that he couldn't bear to be apart from Bai Pianran. Bringing Jojo along was just part of his plan for their happy little family of 3. How pathetic that in her past life, she had been too foolish to see it. A heavy weight settled in Song Xinyue's chest, making it hard for her to breathe. She pulled free from He Yanting's embrace, putting some distance between them, and replied in a low voice, "All right." He Yanting was taken aback by her immediate agreement. His gaze towards her grew complicated, and for the first time, his voice softened as he began to explain, "Don't worry, I'll come back for you. We'll reunite as a family of 3 on the island." Song Xinyue pretended not to hear, closing her eyes to sleep. The child's innocent voice pierced her heart like a blade, draining her of all strength. Had Jojo harbored the thought of making her divorce He Yanting for that long, it took her a long moment to find her voice again. She looked at Jojo and spoke with difficulty. "Jojo, if your dad and I split up, who would you choose to live with?" Jojo answered without a moment's hesitation, "Dad, of course, and I want Aunt Pianran to live with us too." The hope and excitement shining in Jojo's eyes pierced Song Xinyue's heart, making her own eyes sting and well up with tears. This was the son she had poured all her energy into raising for 6 years. Just as He Yanting had said, she really was a failure of a mother. Jojo's eyes darted around. He snatched the divorce application form from her hand. "If Dad signs this, then you two can get divorced, right?" Song Xinyue's throat felt as if it were stuffed with cotton. Unable to speak, she could only give a slight, silent nod. With a cheer, Jojo scampered off on his little legs toward the study. "I'll go get Dad to sign it right now." Song Xinyue's lips twisted into a bitter smile. How desperately her child wanted to leave her. A knock at the door pulled Song Xinyue from her thoughts. When she opened it, she was surprised to find Bai Pianran standing there. Bai Pianran noticed her red-rimmed eyes and asked with concern, "Sister-in-law, what's wrong?" She paused, then asked hesitantly, "Are you upset because Brother Yanting told you he's giving the military dependent spot to me?" "Sister-in-law, Brother Yanting had no choice. The island post needs a doctor. You wouldn't want to see him fall ill, would you?" Although Bai Pianran's words were meant to console her, a glint of triumph hidden deep in her eyes betrayed her true feelings. She was clearly flaunting her importance to He Yanting, while implying that his wife, Song Xinyue, was utterly useless to him. However, she had long since made up her mind not to follow He Yanting to the military post, and no longer cared about this opportunity. Hearing Bai Pianran's voice, He Yanting and Jojo hurried out of the study. Jojo threw herself into Bai Pianran's arms, embracing her tightly. He Yanting also watched the two of them with a smile on his lips. "Jojo really does adore you." Bai Pianran smiled and patted Jojo's head. "I'm fond of Jojo too." Watching this heartwarming scene, Song Xinyue blinked, forcing back the stinging sensation in her eyes, and prepared to leave. "I'm heading to the department store to pick up a few things." Before leaving, she needed to buy some daily necessities that would be useful in the capital. But before she could leave, Bai Pianran, smiling warmly, took hold of her hand. "Sis, I came to see Brother Yanting and Jojo today, and I was actually planning to go shopping too. There's nowhere to buy daily essentials on the island, so we have to prepare in advance. Come with us, you can help us pick things out." Before she could refuse, she was ushered out the door. Song Xinyue had no choice but to go to the department store with the 3 of them. Once at the department store, Bai Pianran took Zhozhou's hand and began expertly selecting items. He Yanting followed closely behind the two of them, never leaving their side. The very picture of a devoted father and husband protecting his family. Song Xinyue averted her gaze and walked in the opposite direction to begin selecting the items she needed. As she passed a newsstand, Song Xinyue's attention was caught by a pilot recruitment advertisement on a newspaper. Unconsciously, she picked up the newspaper, seeing the bold slogan, "Guard the blue skies, live up to your youth." A surge of passion welled up in her heart. Fortunately, in this life, she had been successfully selected, finally able to make up for the regrets of her past life. "What are you doing looking at the pilot recruitment posters? Don't tell me you're thinking of applying." He Yanting's low voice came from behind her. Song Xinyue didn't have time to think. She nodded in agreement instinctively. He Yanting's expression darkened. He stared at her for a long moment before finally speaking. "You're a woman. What are the chances you'd get selected? Don't waste your energy. Just wait for me at the compound, and I'll come back for you." Zhozhou gave a soft snort and muttered under his breath from the side, "Mom only knows how to do laundry and cook. She doesn't have any real skills. There's no way she could ever become a pilot. Aunt Pianran is much better. She's a doctor who saves lives." Though his voice was low, it was loud enough for the two adults present to hear. He Yanting merely glanced at him, not saying a word. Song Xinyue looked at the identical looks of disdain on the faces of the father and son, and a profound sadness washed over her. Although she and He Yanting had met through a matchmaking arrangement, she had told him before their marriage that her father was among the nation's first batch of Air Force pilots. Influenced by him, she had undergone pilot training from a young age, and her physical fitness far exceeded that of an ordinary person. 5 years ago, she took part in an Air Force selection and, as expected, was successfully chosen. But at that time, Zhozhou was only 1 year old. She simply couldn't bring herself to leave him, so she gave up the spot. She had told both the father and son about this matter, yet, not a single one of them remembered. Did they ever really care about her? Song Xinyue really wanted to tell them that she had been successfully selected. However, she was worried that He Yanting wouldn't let her leave if he found out. So she ultimately held back the impulse. "I was just passing by and having a look." He Yanxiao couldn't shake off a nagging feeling that something was off. Song Xinyue had always been solely focused on domestic matters. Since when did she start paying attention to military news? But before he could dwell on it further, his train of thought was abruptly cut off by Bai Pianran's call. Zhozhou urgently tugged at his hand, pulling him toward where Bai Pianran was. Song Xinyue gave a self-deprecating twitch at the corner of her mouth. Once she was gone, they, father and son, would come to realize she was never just a housewife whose world revolved around laundry and cooking. After leaving the department store, He Yanting and Zhozhou, as usual, saw Bai Pianran home first. Song Xinyue had no choice but to carry her bags and go along with them. By the time she got home, she was utterly exhausted and went to bed early. Late that night, Song Xinyue was jolted awake by a piercing cry. From the sound of it, Sister Lin next door and her husband, Brother Zhao, were having a fierce argument. "You think you can just run off and leave the two of us here all by ourselves? No way, I absolutely forbid it. That's not what I meant at all. I'm just worried the conditions there are too harsh for you. You'd be much more comfortable staying here. Why are you twisting my words? I don't care. I'm not letting you go alone, and that's final. If you go, our son and I are coming with you. Otherwise, you're staying right here with us." The rustling and tossing beside him woke He Yanting as well. The two in the next room were still arguing incessantly, and He Yanting let out a soft, derisive snort. "What kind of marriage is it when a couple lives apart? If they're separated, can you even call them husband and wife? Brother Zhao is in the wrong here." A sudden, sharp pain pierced his heart. He Yanting had always known that a married couple shouldn't live apart, yet in his past life, he still resolutely chose to leave with Bai Pianran, leaving her alone in the compound with their child. Didn't this prove that in his heart, Bai Pianran was his true wife, while she, Song Xinyue, was merely a nanny responsible for looking after the child and serving his parents? At this thought, the stinging bitterness in Song Xinyue's eyes was almost unbearable. Her voice hoarse, she asked, "And what about you, He Yanting? Why did you leave me behind in the compound? We're husband and wife too. How is what you did any different from what Brother Zhao did? Or is it that, in your eyes, I was never really your wife?" This question had weighed on her heart for what felt like 2 lifetimes, and she finally gave voice to it. But He Yanting only replied, his tone laced with a chill, "I told you I'd come back for you. I thought you'd understand why I had to do it that way. I never expected you to be so petty about it." Song Xinyue's lips parted. She wanted to say that in her past life, he had said the same thing, yet he never kept his promise. Instead, he spent most of his life by Pianran's side, but who would believe such a story if she told it? What's more, after her past life, she should have finally seen the truth. He Yenting never loved her. Song Xinyue closed her eyes and said nothing more. They shared a bed that night, but their dreams were worlds apart. Early the next morning, when Song Xinyue awoke, He Yenting had already left the house on urgent military business. After Zhozhou finished his breakfast, she picked up his backpack to walk him to school. The moment they stepped outside, Zhozhou pulled a piece of paper from his bag and handed it to her. Song Xinyue took it, unfolded it, and realized it was a divorce application. At the very bottom of the form, the name He Yenting was scrawled in a bold, flamboyant hand. Zhozhou tilted her head back with a smug look. I already got Dad to sign it, now you two can get divorced. This signed divorce application was what she had been waiting for ever since her rebirth. Yet, he was a man she had loved for a lifetime. Now, seeing his bold, forceful signature on the document felt like a knife twisting in her chest. She stared at it for a long time before carefully putting the divorce papers away, her voice heavy with exhaustion. I'll find time to go and file for the divorce. Zhozhou let out a cheer and skipped ahead. Just as they were about to reach the school gate, he came to a stop. Mom, I can go into the school by myself, you can head back now. Song Xinyue saw that the school wasn't far, so she didn't object. She waited until he was about to enter the school gate before turning to leave. After returning to the compound, Song Xinyue gathered the documents she would need for her trip to Beijing. She then cleared out and discarded some items from the house that she couldn't take with her. She was afraid that Bai Pianran would move into this house soon after she left. Rather than being thrown out in disgrace by someone else later, it was better for her to clear out her things herself. Song Xinyue made 3 or 4 trips back and forth, after clearing out the last batch of clutter. She dusted herself off and prepared to go home for a shower. At that moment, Auntie Zhang in the courtyard spotted her and exclaimed in surprise, Xinyue, why are you still at home? Isn't today the school's open house? All the other parents have gone. I only stayed back because my tiger is sick in bed. Is your Zhozhou sick too? Song Xinyue was taken aback. She had no idea about this event. In her past life, she'd never heard of an open house either, but she didn't dwell on it. Simply assuming that little Zhozhou had forgotten to tell her and He Yenting because of his age. After thanking Auntie Zhang, she hurried to the school gate. I was stopped by the security guard on duty the moment I reached the entrance. Which student's parent are you? Song Xinyue quickly scanned the crowd for Zhozhou, but just as she spotted the familiar little figure, she noticed someone she knew was holding his hand. It was Bai Pianran. The cry that had just reached her lips died in her throat. What was Bai Pianran doing here? At that moment, Zhozhou's classmate was introducing their own parents to Zhozhou. After hearing this, Zhozhou took Bai Pianran's hand and said proudly, this is my mom, she's a doctor, and she's amazing. In an instant, all the noise around Song Xinyue seemed to vanish. She couldn't hear a thing. Her mind echoed with just one phrase, she is my mom. From a distance, she watched Zhozhou proudly holding Bai Pianran's hand, introducing her to each classmate as if showing off a treasure. It felt like a gaping hole had been torn in her chest, letting a cold wind howl straight through. Has Zhozhou already started calling Bai Pianran mom so eagerly, even before she's officially divorced He Yenting? Soon, another tall figure appeared before Song Xinyue's eyes. It was He Yenting, the one who had claimed to have a task that morning. He Yenting and Bai Pianran held Zhozhou's hands on either side, all 3 of them wearing identical, blissful smiles. No wonder she had no idea about the parent visitation day. Not in this life nor the last. Even He Yenting had never mentioned it, so he had known all along and had privately arranged with Zhozhou for Bai Pianran to attend the event as Zhozhou's mother. The father and son had already conspired to keep this from her, the biological mother, the lawful wife, and at such an early stage. The image of her past life, lying on her deathbed, surfaced in Song Xinyue's mind. Zhozhou was completely engrossed in the couple on the TV screen, paying no attention to her mother who lay there, fading away. It seemed clear now that during He Yenting's years on the island, they must have been in contact all along. Zhozhou had probably already accepted Bai Pianran as her mother, just waiting for her own mother to pass so she could officially take her place. Song Xinyue couldn't bear to watch any longer. She turned and walked away. A cold wind met her face, sweeping away the tears that had welled up in her eyes. She went straight to the marriage registry office. Pulling out the divorce application, she carefully signed her name on the other side and handed it to the clerk. Comrade, I've signed the papers. Please proceed with the divorce formalities for me. After verifying the report was in order, the clerk promptly processed her divorce. Only when she held the divorce certificate in her hand did Song Xinyue truly feel it. She was now completely free of any ties to that father and son. In the following days, Song Xinyue resumed her physical fitness training ahead of schedule. Despite having a foundation from her childhood, the intensity of her training had dropped off considerably since giving birth to Zhozhou. She was determined to get back into peak physical condition before heading to the capital. He Yanting, meanwhile, was busy these days handling the handover of his work before his trip to the South China Sea next month. With no one to look after Zhozhou at home over the weekend, Song Xinyue had no choice but to take him to the training ground. She brought water and snacks for him, letting him sit to the side and play by himself, just as he had settled in that day. He happened to see Bai Pianran passing by. Zhozhou immediately threw her arms around Bai Pianran's waist in excitement and refused to let go. "Auntie Pianran, will you play with me? Mom just makes me sit here by myself all day long. I'm so bored I could die." Song Xinyue's fingers curled slightly. It had been a long time since she had seen such an adoring, affectionate look on Zhozhou's face. Bai Pianran gently ruffled his hair and glanced at Song Xinyue, a hint of smugness hidden in her eyes. "You'll have to ask your mom if it's okay." Before Zhozhou could speak, Song Xinyue took a deep breath and said to him calmly, "Go play with Dr. Bai, don't wander off too far, and be careful. After all, keeping Zhozhou here would only make her more annoyed. Besides, after she leaves, Zhozhou will be with Bai Pianran anyway, so why bother stopping them from getting close now?" A flicker passed through Bai Pianran's eyes, and a barely perceptible smile touched her lips as she took Zhozhou's hand and led her in another direction. Zhozhou didn't resist at all, skipping along happily by her side. Song Xinyue opened her mouth to call out to them, but in the end, she averted her gaze and focused on her training. However, just as she finished warming up and was about to begin in earnest, she heard Zhozhou's cries coming from nearby. Song Xinyue's expression changed instantly, and she immediately rushed toward the source of the sound. As soon as she spotted the two familiar figures, her eyes were drawn to a vivid red mark on Zhozhou's forehead. Bai Pianran stood by in a panic, pulling gauze from her white coat to try and stop the bleeding, but the blood quickly soaked through. Without a second thought, Song Xinyue immediately scooped up the child and broke into a desperate run. The clinic. Only after an hour of stitching by the doctor was the bleeding finally brought under control. Song Xinyue's anxiety finally subsided, allowing her the mental space to confront Bai Pianran. "How did Zhozhou manage to cut his head open? And you're a doctor yourself. With a wound that serious, why didn't you take him to the hospital immediately? If I hadn't been close by and gotten here in time, he could have lost a dangerous amount of blood." Bai Pianran still looked shaken, but she instinctively argued back, "How was I supposed to know the kid would be so hyper? I looked away for 1 second and he jumped off the steps and fell. Besides, I'm not a surgeon. It's perfectly normal that I didn't react immediately." A surge of anger rose from the depths of Song Xinyue's heart. Bai Pianran was clearly making excuses. Upon hearing the news, He Yanting rushed to the clinic in a hurry. He burst into the ward, and seeing the child lying in bed with his head tightly wrapped in bandages, his eyes instantly blazed with fury. "How did Zhozhou get hurt?" Bai Pianran averted her gaze. Song Xinyue suppressed her anger, just as she was about to tell the truth. From the hospital bed, Zhozhou's weak voice spoke up, "Daddy, it was Mommy who took me there. That's how I got hurt." Song Xinyue froze in place, unable to believe what she had just heard. It was clearly Bai Pianran who took him to another place, which is why he got hurt. Yet, he's pinning all the blame on her, she asked, her voice trembling. "Zhozhou, tell me again, who exactly is responsible for your injury?" Zhozhou's lips quivered, and tears began to fall. "It's you. It's all your fault. I wouldn't have fallen if it weren't for you. And after I fell, you didn't even take me to the hospital. It was Aunt Pianran who carried me there." Song Xinyue listened to his twisted version of events, a chill running through her entire body. With every breath came a sharp, stabbing pain. Her own flesh and blood, the son she carried for 10 months, had the gall to slander her. Even though she had resolved to sever ties with He Yanting and his son, Zhozhou was still a part of her. How could her heart not ache at the sight of him hurt? Yet he hurt her again and again. Twisting the knife in her already bleeding heart, He Yanting seized Song Xinyue's wrist, dragging her out of the hospital room. He didn't release her until they reached a deserted spot. A vein throbbed at his temple, his voice thick with towering rage. "Song Xinyue, how could you let this happen to our son? You don't even have a job to distract you. Your only duty is to look after him. And yet, you not only allowed him to get this badly hurt, but you didn't even take him to the hospital right away. I'm starting to wonder if you're even his real mother. How could you be so cruel?" Her nails dug deep into her palms, With the grievances of this life and the last combined, Song Xingyue felt the final shred of attachment she held for this father and son pair vanish completely. Nothing remains but endless disappointment. Song Xingyue gave a faint, bitter smile and spoke softly, "Fine, in that case, I won't be his mother anymore. I'll leave that role to Dr. Bai. I'll leave the role of wife to Bai Pianran as well." He Yanting's gaze met the utter emptiness in her eyes, and his brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. But the moment he thought of the wound on his son's forehead, his heart hardened once more. He was convinced Song Xingyue was just saying the opposite out of anger from his scolding. After all, she loved the child so much, how could she possibly not want him? But this time, Song Xingyue's behavior had truly gone too far. He had to teach her a lesson. What does this have to do with Pianran? She was kind enough to take Zhozhou to the hospital, and you have the nerve to spread rumors about her. That's the height of ingratitude. Song Xingyue let out a light laugh, but her eyes were filled with profound sorrow. Don't you want her to be Zhozhou's mother? That way, the two of you can be together openly. As the words hung in the air, He Yanting's fury intensified. With a loud thud, he slammed his fist into the wall beside her face, his expression dark and stormy. I've never had any feelings for Pianran beyond friendship. Don't jump to conclusions, there's nothing between us. Song Xingyue found the whole thing utterly ridiculous. If there's nothing between them, why would He Yanting keep Bai Pianran by his side for 20 years in that compound? If they're so innocent, why did He Yanting single out Bai Pianran for thanks when he received the August 1st medal, without mentioning anyone else? If she was innocent, why would Zhozhou urge her to leave and make way for Bai Pianran before she drew her last breath? But Song Xingyue had no desire to engage in a pointless argument with him now. She only had 6 days left before her departure. She could endure it. Without another word, Song Xingyue turned and left the clinic, not sparing Zhozhou another glance. Over the next few days, Song Xingyue packed her bags for the trip to the capital while continuing her physical training. She didn't lay eyes on He Yanting once, nor did she inquire about Zhozhou's recovery at the hospital. After all, she had finally come to terms with the fact that she meant nothing to that father and son. She wouldn't humiliate herself by reaching out to them again. The day of departure also happened to be the day Zhozhou was discharged from the hospital. He Yanting, quite out of character, made a call to the house. His voice still carried a certain stiffness, but the usual chill was gone. Zhozhou is being discharged today. Make a few dishes for lunch so we can celebrate as a family. Song Xingyue fell silent for a moment. The words "as a family" struck a chord deep within her. In her past life, He Yanting only returned home twice in the 20 years he was away, but on both occasions, he would stay for merely 2 or 3 hours before hastily leaving again, citing the need to catch a train. In all those 20 years, the family of 3 never once managed to share a proper reunion meal. Even by the time she drew her last breath, that wish remained unfulfilled. In the end, Song Xingyue agreed. She saw it as a way to resolve the regrets of her past life, to put a perfect final period on the lifetime of devotion she had lived before. It was also the start of a new chapter in the vast, open future of her present life. After packing her bags, Song Xingyue prepared a table full of dishes and waited for the father and son to return. The clock on the wall ticked steadily on. She waited from 11:30 until 1 in the afternoon, but they still hadn't returned. Song Xingyue had a sinking feeling they weren't coming back. Sure enough, the moment the thought crossed her mind, the phone rang. He Yanting's voice held a rare note of apology. Pianran has been working very hard taking care of Zhozhou these past few days. I'm treating her to a meal at the state-run restaurant to thank her, so we won't be back for lunch. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, followed by a hesitant question. Why don't you come join us? Song Xingyue heard Zhozhou's disgruntled muttering from the side. Mom hasn't come to see me for days. Why should she get to eat this? I don't want to see her. This meal was ordered especially for Aunt Pianran. Song Xingyue wasn't upset. Instead, she let out a soft chuckle. I won't be joining you. Please, go ahead and eat. She paused, then finally spoke. He Yanting, Zhozhou, goodbye. With that, she hung up the phone. The faint sound of a car horn came from outside the door. Song Xingyue retrieved her suitcase from the bedroom and placed her divorce certificate beneath a plate of untouched food. She took one last look around the house she had called home for nearly 40 years, across 2 lifetimes. She would never return here again. As the private car bound for the capital city pulled away, all the buildings of the Southwest Military District receded into the distance. From then on, she remained in the capital city. While He Yanting and his son were stationed in the South China Sea, separated by the vast expanse of the country, they would never meet again. For the rest of her life, Song Xinyue would soar through the skies to defend our nation's airspace. On the other end of the line, after Song Xinyue hung up, He Yanting frowned, a strange feeling welling up in his chest. Song Xinyue never hung up on him first. What did she mean by that final goodbye? He and Jojo were just taking Song Xinyue out to the state-run restaurant for a meal to thank her. As she had requested, they'd be back by afternoon at the latest. Why did it sound like they were leaving for good? He Yanting's eyelid twitched. For some reason, a flicker of panic began to rise within him. It felt as if something was slipping away from him, somewhere in the unseen currents of fate. Dad, hurry up and order. Make sure to get all the dishes Aunt Pianran likes. Jojo's shout snapped him out of his thoughts. He Yanting snapped back to the present and looked down at the menu in his hands. The dishes pictured there, though vibrant and enticing, seemed utterly bland and unappealing to him. He never liked eating out. Only Song Xinyue's cooking could satisfy his palate. He had originally thought that, to thank Bai Pianran, he could just make do with a meal at the state-run restaurant. Yet, for some reason, the thought of Song Xinyue's home-cooked meals popped into his head. He had been visiting Jojo at the hospital whenever he had a spare moment these past few days. Having not eaten a proper meal at home for so long, he found himself actually missing it. He Yinfeng closed the menu, a note of apology in his voice. Pianran, Zhuzhou, and I will head back first this afternoon. How about we treat you to a meal in a couple of days? Bai Pianran was playing with Jojo when his words made her smile freeze on her face. She spoke, a hint of hurt in her voice. Brother Yanting, you promised to have dinner with me. Why do you have to go back now? Did sister-in-law sound upset on the phone just now? Jojo immediately grabbed He Yanting's hand, his little face full of reluctance. Dad, I don't want to go back. I want to have dinner with Aunt Pianran. Besides, Aunt Pianran has been taking such good care of me these past few days. She has to work and still finds time to come check on me in the hospital. How can we go back on our word? He Yanting's resolve began to waver. As a man of his word, he knew it was wrong to break a promise. His gaze fell upon Bai Pianran's reddened eyes, and he finally made up his mind. He reopened the menu and signaled the waiter to order. Only then did Bai Pianran's face light up with a smile again. After the meal, He Yanting and Jojo, as usual, saw Bai Pianran home first. Before entering the room, Bai Pianran gently touched the scar on Jojo's forehead, her heart aching with tenderness. Jojo, remember not to get the wound wet when you get home, okay? You must disinfect it with iodine every day. Jojo hugged her arm, acting coquettishly. I know, Auntie Pianran, I just knew you cared about me the most. Bai Pianran gently pinched his chubby cheek, then looked at He Yanting with a hint of apprehension. Brother Yanting, do you think sister-in-law is really upset today? Maybe I should come back with you to explain things to her. He Yanting shook his head and offered a considerate reminder. You should get some proper rest this afternoon. I've really put you through a lot these past few days. I'll handle the situation with Xinyue. It was her fault that Jojo got hurt in the first place, which ended up putting you in charge of his care. If anything, she should be the one thanking you. Bai Pianran pursed her lips shyly. Brother Yanting, there's no need to be so formal with me. Once we set off for the South China Sea next month, we'll be each other's closest companions there. He Yanting's expression faltered for a moment, finding the remark strangely awkward. Yet, once they arrived in the South Sea, they truly had no one but each other. So the statement didn't seem entirely wrong. After bidding farewell to Bai Pianran, He Yanting took Jojo's hand and walked towards the compound. The previously cheerful and bouncing Jojo grew visibly more despondent with each step closer to the compound. He Yanting simply assumed Jojo was still holding a grudge against Song Xinyue for causing his injury, and didn't pay it much mind. After all, a child's emotions come and go quickly, and Song Xinyue is his mother. He'll forget all about this before long. Although at first, he was also angry that Song Xinyue hadn't kept a closer eye on the child and hadn't even brought him to the hospital promptly, but upon later reflection, he realized Song Xinyue is the child's own mother. How could she possibly stand by and watch him get hurt and bleed? She was most likely just frozen in shock when he fell. Jojo, however, suddenly stopped in his tracks, refusing to go any further, and said in a rather sullen voice, Dad, why haven't you and Mom gotten a divorce yet? I want to stay with Aunt Pianran forever. He Yanting turned around and crouched down in front of Jojo, his face grave. Jojo, who told you the word divorce? Jojo swallowed hard. He had never seen his father look so stern. He took a few frightened steps back and stammered in reply. It's, Mom. The anger He Yanting had felt towards Song Xinyue had barely subsided for a few days before it flared up again, white-hot. As a mother, as a wife, how could she utter the word divorce in front of the child? What on earth was she thinking? He Yenting forced down his rage, doing his utmost not to lose his temper in front of the child. Jojo, your mother and I are not getting a divorce. Jojo was utterly confused. But why? Dad, you're clearly happy with Aunt Pianran, and aren't we supposed to leave here next month, leaving Mom all alone in the compound? He Yenting took a deep breath, unsure of how to explain it to his child. Bai Pianran was the sister of his late comrade-in-arms, so it was only natural for him to look out for her. In the Southwest Military Region, he was the only person she knew. Furthermore, as a doctor, she would be a great asset to the border guards if brought to the island. He very much wished to take Song Xinyue and her family of 3 with him as well. However, there was only one spot available for accompanying family members. After weighing his options, he had no choice but to give it to Bai Pianran, planning to return for Song Xinyue once he was settled. But all of this was still too complicated for a 6-year-old to grasp. In the end, He Yenting swallowed the words he wanted to say and simply told Jojo earnestly, Jojo, grown-up matters are not for children to worry about. You just need to remember that your mother will always be Song Xinyue, and she will always be my wife. The little features on Jojo's face scrunched up together in confusion, but Dad clearly signed that divorce paper. Mom said once he signed it, they would be divorced. But, Dad, alright, Jojo, that's enough. You mustn't say things like that in front of your mother. Thinking the boy still wanted him to be with Bai Pianran, He Yenting cut him off. Taking his hand, he led him straight home. As he pushed the door open, He Yenting expected to find Song Xinyue, as usual, having prepared a meal and waiting at the table for him and their son to return. But when he took in the scene inside the room, he froze for a moment. It was true that the table was laden with a full spread of dishes, yet the familiar figure that should have been seated there was conspicuously absent. The food had long gone cold, congealing on the plates, and a desolate chill hung in the air of the room. He Yenting searched the entire house but found no trace of Song Xinyue. Jojo tugged at his sleeve, a barely detectable hint of fear in his childish voice. Daddy, why isn't Mommy home? He Yenting had no idea where Song Xinyue had gone. Ever since their marriage, she had immediately become pregnant with Jojo. She had stayed home to focus on raising the child, never taking a job. The compound was where she spent most of her time. Where else could she possibly go? He Yunlei sat down and carefully considered all the places she might be. His gaze swept instinctively across the room, and he suddenly realized some items were missing. He immediately got up, went to the bedroom, and opened the wardrobe. Just as he had suspected, all the women's clothes in the wardrobe were gone. An unbelievable thought flashed through He Yenting's mind. Song Xinyue actually ran away from home. Jojo spoke up cautiously. Dad, where did Mom go? After the initial panic subsided, an endless fury took its place in He Yenting's heart. Was it really necessary for Song Xinyue to make such a big deal out of him not coming home for lunch today? He hadn't even confronted her about mentioning divorce in front of their child, and now she was pulling this stunt of running away from home. He Yenting, his face dark, worked to soothe his son's emotions. It's okay, Mom will be back in a few days. Jojo's stomach let out a low rumble. He had been a picky eater since childhood, just like He Yenting, and never cared much for restaurant food. He had barely touched his food at the state-run restaurant earlier, only eating to keep Bai Pianran company. By now, he was absolutely starving. His mouth watered instinctively at the sight of the feast laid out on the table, a perfect balance of meat and vegetables, each dish a delight for the eyes and the nose. Dad, I'm hungry. He Yenting glanced at the food, which had gone cold, and picked up the plates to reheat them. As he lifted one, a small notebook that had been tucked underneath clattered to the floor. The notebook had fallen right into the gap between the desk and the corner, and He Yenting didn't notice. After heating up the meal, the father and son ate their fill. The wound on Jojo's forehead hadn't fully healed yet. After applying medicine, He Yenting put him to bed early, but Jojo held his hand, asking for a bedtime story. Daddy, Mommy tells me a bedtime story every night, or I can't fall asleep. With no other choice, He Yenting had to take out a storybook, sit by the bed, and read to him. After what felt like an eternity, the little hand clutching his shirt finally went limp and fell away. He Yenting finally breathed a sigh of relief. After confirming his son was sound asleep, he carefully tucked him in and then tiptoed back to the bedroom. Lying in bed, He Yenting felt parched. In the past, everything for Jojo at home, including bedtime, had always been handled by Song Xinyue. He never knew that Jojo needed such a long bedtime story to fall asleep. Exhaustion quickly washed over him, and He Yenting fell into a deep sleep. Bang! He Yunming kicked the door open, his eyes blazing with fury as he glared at the smug-looking woman. Bai Pianran, how could you be such a vicious woman? Bai Pianran was chatting animatedly with her girlfriends, completely caught off guard by He Yunming's sudden entrance. Her face turned deathly pale and her heart raced with panic, yet she forced herself to appear calm as she tried to explain, "Yunting, you must have misheard me. I was just joking. How could I ever do something like that? It was you." Tears welled up in Jojo's eyes as she pointed an accusing finger at her, her face contorted with anger. "If you hadn't dragged me away from my mom last time, I wouldn't have hit my head. I was worried Dad would scold you for pinning the blame on Mom. I never imagined you did it on purpose, you wicked woman." Although Jojo's heart was now leaning towards Song Xinyue, he still felt that Bai Pianran had been good to him. Little did he know, it was all a facade. He Yunting's fists clenched with an audible crack, his eyes filled with a sinister glare as he spoke through gritted teeth. "So it was you, you're the one who hurt Jojo. Bai Pianran, I've been taking care of you all this time, just as your brother wished in his final words. And yet, you tried to kill my child and drive my wife away." Bai Pianran looked around in a panic, hoping someone would speak up for her, but the others in the office, sensing trouble, had already slunk away, leaving just the three of them. Realizing the father and son had heard the whole truth, Bai Pianran was terrified, her voice trembling as she tried to defend herself. "Yunting, I just loved you too much. All I ever wanted was to be your wife. As for Jojo, I lost my head for a moment. I've regretted it ever since. I've been taking care of him every day, and I swear I'll make it up to him. Please, just forgive me this once." He Yunting let out a cold, grating laugh from his throat, his large hand closing around her neck. "Forgive you? And who will bear the pain my son and wife have suffered in their place?" His grip tightened relentlessly. Bai Pianran pounded desperately on his arm, trying to break free. Only when Bai Pianran's eyes began to roll back did he Yunting, with a look of utter disgust, fling her aside. "You're going to prison for this." Bai Pianran clutched her throat, coughing desperately. Upon hearing this, she immediately grabbed hold of He Yunting's pant leg, pleading, "Brother Yunting, please don't. You promised my brother you would take care of me." He Yunting cast one last look at the weeping Bai Pianran, his eyes filled with nothing but disgust. "But I never promised your brother I would let you harm my wife and child. What's more, if your brother knew you'd done something like this, he'd probably wish he never had a sister like you." With that, He Yunting strode back into the compound, holding Jojo in his arms. At that moment, all he wanted was to find Song Xinyue's location immediately, even if it meant using his authority as a regiment commander. After settling Jojo, he intended to go to the barracks and order his men to search for Song Xinyue, but before he could leave, Jojo tugged at his sleeve, her eyes brimming with tears as she asked, "Dad, you and Mom are divorced now. Does that mean Mom is never coming back?" He Yunting felt a sudden, inexplicable pang of panic. He hadn't divorced Song Xinyue, so why did Jojo keep bringing it up? "Jojo, who told you that your mother and I got divorced?" Tears welled up in Jojo's eyes instantly, and she sobbed. 2 weeks ago, Mom showed me a document. She said if you signed it, you two would get divorced. At the time, I wanted you to be with that awful woman, so I brought you the document to sign." Boom. Jojo's words hit He Yunting's heart like a sledgehammer. A report, a divorce application. He actually signed the divorce papers. He Yunting still remembered that moment in his study, buried in official work, when Jojo slipped a piece of paper into his hand and asked him to sign it. Thinking it was some school document requiring a parent's signature, he signed his name without even glancing at it. Little did he know, it was actually a divorce application. That meant, as soon as Song Xinyue signed it, she could obtain the divorce certificate with ease. Her disappearance these past few days wasn't a fit of pique or a temporary walkout. She had made a firm decision to leave this home for good, to abandon both him and their son. As Jojo watched the utterly devastated look on He Yunting's face, the unease in his heart grew heavier. "Dad, I know I was wrong. I don't want Mom to leave. Can you please bring her back?" Looking at his son, who was now sobbing uncontrollably, He Yunting was overwhelmed with self-reproach. If only he had kept a proper distance from Bai Pianran, their son wouldn't have been fooled into getting close to her, and Song Xinyue wouldn't have been driven away with a broken heart. When it came down to it, it was all his fault. Yet, a sliver of hope still lingered in his heart. He hadn't seen the divorce papers yet. Maybe Song Xinyue couldn't bring herself to go through with it and was just still furious. He hurriedly comforted his son. "Don't worry, Jojo, Mom will definitely come back." Mid-sentence, He Yunting's gaze was caught by a sharp corner in the wall. He moved the table aside and carefully picked the object up. The moment it was fully revealed, He Yunting saw it clearly. It was unmistakably a divorce certificate. He Yunting's breath caught in his throat. So Song Xinyue had already gone to the marriage registry and obtained the divorce certificate on the very day she left. She had really left this home for good. He Yenting pulled Zhou into a fierce embrace. The man who hadn't shed a tear even when shot on a mission now had red-rimmed eyes, his voice hoarse. Zhou, let's find mom together and apologize to her. After the divorce from Song Xinyue, He Yenting no longer had any justification to use his authority as a regiment commander to mobilize others to search for her. Left with no other choice, he carried Zhou and knocked on the door of the commanding officer's office. The commander was taken aback by the lifeless expressions on the faces of the father and son. Yenting, what's going on with you two? He Yenting's voice was hoarse. Sir, my wife and I have been having some issues. She left home, and I was hoping you could help me find out where she went. The senior officer frowned, looking at him with a puzzled expression. Comrade Song Xinyue was selected as a pilot trainee 2 weeks ago and has already left for Beijing to begin training. How could you, as her husband, not know this? The officer's words struck the father and son like a thunderclap. Zhou immediately burst into tears and started wailing. Does mom not want us anymore? I want my mom. He Yenting seemed not to hear. After a long, heavy silence, he finally spoke with difficulty. When will she be back? I'm leaving for the South China Sea next month. The commanding officer could tell the couple had a serious falling out and let out a deep, heavy sigh. Once selected, pilots are permanently stationed in Beijing. Comrade Song Xinyue. She's probably never coming back. 3 years later, Hulu Island, South China Sea, Song Xinyue and her party disembarked from the helicopter. The moment her feet touched the ground, a little boy wrapped his arms around Song Xinyue's leg. Mommy, I didn't cry at all on the plane. I was so brave. Don't you think I deserve a reward? Song Xinyue picked up Xiao Yan with a sigh, affectionately giving his nose a little pinch. All right, our Xiao Yan is a brave little man. What would you like mommy to give you as a reward? Xiao Yan pretended to be deep in thought for a moment, then his eyes lit up. All right then, I don't want to tire mom out. How about you just make my favorite sweet and sour pork ribs? Hearing Xiao Yan's cheeky words, Song Xinyue couldn't help but find it amusing. For the past 3 years, Xiao Yan had absolutely loved her cooking, and his weight had been steadily climbing. To avoid affecting his physical development, Song Xinyue deliberately started preparing healthy, low-oil, low-salt meals to help him manage his weight. High-sugar dishes like sweet and sour pork ribs hadn't been served to him in a long time. It was obvious Xiao Yan had been craving that dish for ages, yet he tried to pass it off as being considerate of him. Song Xinyue gently flicked him on the forehead. Such a little body, such a big personality. Seeing his little scheme exposed, Xiao Yan instantly deflated. He patted his little belly and muttered under his breath, my poor stomach has it so rough with me, never getting to eat any delicious food. Song Xinyue couldn't help but burst out laughing. She gently ruffled Xiao Yan's hair and said softly, I'll make your favorite sweet and sour pork ribs for dinner tonight. Xiao Yan's eyes lit up instantly, and he cheered, raising his chubby little fist. Yay, mom's the best. Seeing Xiao Yan's joyful expression, Song Xinyue couldn't help but smile. Feeling all the fatigue from the 3-hour flight melt away, a familiar male voice came from beside her. If you keep spoiling him like this, when will he ever get back to a normal, healthy weight for a child? Song Xinyue looked at Lu Xing'an's helpless expression and allowed a small smile to lift the corner of her mouth. Just this once, it's fine, Lu Xing'an sighed. He knew Song Xinyue could never refuse Xiao Yan's requests, just as he couldn't bring himself to say anything to stop her. I'll carry him. The others have already gone to the dormitory. Let's catch up. Song Xinyue didn't refuse and passed Xiao Yan into Lu Xing'an's arms. Let's go. We can check if the dorm kitchen is fully equipped. If anything's missing, we'll pick it up when we go out for groceries later, Lu Xing'an said with a teasing laugh. Anyone who didn't know better would think we're here in the South China Sea for a picnic, not a military exercise. The two of them walked toward the dormitory, chatting and laughing. After putting away their luggage, and before the base closed, Song Xinyue took Lu Xing'an out to buy some pork ribs and started cooking a meal in the dorm. Soon, the savory aroma of the ribs filled the entire room. Xiao Yan sniffed the air sharply and clapped her hands in excitement. I'm finally going to get to eat sweet and sour pork ribs. Lu Xing'an couldn't help but chuckle at the child's excited display. It seems the strict diet from the past had left him craving it for too long. His gaze then fell upon Song Xinyue, busy in the kitchen, his eyes brimming with tenderness. As soon as the sweet and sour pork ribs were served, Xiao Yan immediately pulled out his chair and sat down obediently, waiting for the meal to begin. Song Xinyue scooped a heaping bowl of rice and placed it in front of him. All right, dig in. I'll let you eat to your heart's content today, but starting tomorrow, that's it. Fortunately, Shan Yan was a child who was easily content. He was already overjoyed just to have his favorite sweet and sour pork ribs for this meal. No problem, Mom. Seeing Shan Yan eat with such delight, a warm smile spread across Lu Xing'an's eyes. His gaze shifted to Song Xinyue, who was watching Shan Yan intently. A flicker of concern passed through his eyes as he began to speak, his voice hesitant. Xinyue, about this trip to the South China Sea, you. Song Xinyue knew exactly what he was worried about. Lu Xing'an knew that He Yanting and his son were stationed in the South China Sea, and he was worried she might run into them. But for Song Xinyue, He Yanting and his son were already a thing of the past. The pain they had caused had also begun to fade. Don't worry, even if we run into them, it's no big deal. We're just here in the South China Sea for exercises. We'll be heading back to Beijing next month. Besides, the South China Sea coastline is so long, Heludio might not even be He Yanting's station. But things in this world always have a way of being so coincidental, it's hard to predict. After dinner, Song Xinyue and Lu Xing'an took Shan Yan for a walk along the island's shore. Shan Yan had lived in the capital city since birth, so this was his first time seeing the ocean, and he was absolutely thrilled. He scampered along the gravel path on his little legs. Song Xinyue's gaze never left him. Slow down, watch your step. No sooner had the words been spoken than Shan Yan stumbled and pitched forward. Song Xinyue's pupils contracted. Instinctively, she reached out and pulled him into her arms. However, the sudden impact caught Song Xinyue off guard. After catching Shan Yan, she was thrown off balance and hit the ground hard, scraping the skin on her arm. Lu Xing'an hurriedly helped them both to their feet. Xinyue, where did you hurt yourself? Seeing Song Xinyue get hurt while protecting someone, Shan Yan was filled with self-reproach, heart aching. He held her arm and gently blew on it to soothe the pain. Mom, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have been running. You wouldn't have gotten hurt otherwise. Looking at the identical looks of concern on the faces of the older and younger person before her, a wave of warmth spread through Song Xinyue's heart. The cut on her arm was just from a fall onto some stones. It looked like a lot of blood, but it was only a surface scratch. Just as she was about to speak to comfort them, two familiar voices called out from behind her. Xinyue, Mom. He Yinxiao and his son couldn't believe their eyes. There stood the person they had missed for 3 long years. Zhozhou, being the youngest, was the first to lose his composure. The moment he saw his mother, whom he hadn't seen in 3 years, his eyes welled up and he rushed to throw himself into her arms. Mom, I've missed you so much. Song Xinyue sighed inwardly, never expecting such an unfortunate coincidence. The island designated for the exercise happened to be the very one under He Yanting's command. Just as Zhozhou was about to throw himself into her arms, Song Xinyue pulled Shan Yan aside, deftly avoiding the embrace. Zhozhou stared at her in disbelief. His eyes filled with hurt. Mom, why did you pull away? Don't you miss me after 3 years apart? Song Xinyue didn't want Shan Yan to get caught up in the adult's complicated affairs, so she crouched down to talk to him. Shan Yan, Mommy has something to take care of. Could you go back with Daddy first? Although Shan Yan was worried about her injury, he was always an obedient boy and nodded in agreement. Without a word, Lu Xing'an scooped up Shan Yan, casting a deep, meaningful glance at the father and son opposite him. I'll be waiting for you to come back. After the two of them had left, Zhozhou couldn't hold back any longer and asked, Mom, why did that little boy call you Mom? Song Xinyue said calmly, because he is my child. Of course he calls me Mom. Hearing this, Zhozhou's eyes welled up with tears. He couldn't understand. He was clearly his mother's child. How could there be another child by her side after just 3 years apart? He Yanting said with a complicated expression, Xinyue, that child looks to be about 5 years old. You can't possibly be her biological mother. Song Xinyue fell silent for a moment. She indeed was not Shan Yan's biological mother. 3 years ago, just as her training in the capital city ended, she heard the sound of a child's heart-wrenching sobs coming from an office, perhaps driven by a mother's instinct. Song Xinyue followed the sound. Upon opening the door, she found Lu Xing'an frantically trying to soothe the child. That child was Shan Yan. Seeing the child crying to the point of near collapse, Song Xinyue reached out and gently gathered him into her arms, soothing him with patient care. Before long, Shan Yan finally stopped crying and drifted off to sleep. She learned from Lu Xing'an that Shan Yan's parents had been killed in action, and that he was now being cared for by the military district. Lu Xing'an had no experience looking after children either, so he was often all fingers and thumbs. Perhaps because they shared similar backgrounds, Song Xinyue felt a deep sense of compassion for Shan Yan. After every training session, she would come to take care of him. Over time, Xian Yan began to see her as a mother and Lu Xing'an as a father. Even though he's not my biological child, in my heart, he is my only child. Zhou immediately burst into loud, heart-wrenching sobs. Mom, I'm your son too, how can you deny me? He Yanting held Zhou close, his expression pained. Xingyue, 3 years ago, Zhou and I misjudged you and hurt you. That was our mistake, but you can't deny the fact that Zhou is your child. We've been searching for you for 3 years, and Zhou has been hoping for your return every single day. Song Xingyue curled her lips in a sardonic smile. My child would never hide from me that he had another woman pose as his mother on Parents' Day. In an instant, He Yanting and his son froze on the spot. They hadn't expected Song Xingyue to know about this. He Yanting explained, his face pale. Zhou was deceived by Pianran. He's still young and doesn't know any better. Song Xingyue looked at him coldly. And what about you? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie and say you had a mission that morning? He Yunlei opened his mouth, only able to repeat the words weakly. I was also deceived by the image she crafted. It was Pianran who said she'd never experienced what it's like to be a mother. That's why no amount of words could ever cover up the harm they caused back then. I'm only in Heludio for a mission this time. I'll be leaving next month. So just pretend you never saw me. He Yanting stared at her in disbelief. Xingyue, are you really going to leave us again? How can you just abandon us like this? Song Xingyue was almost driven to bitter laughter. What do you mean she abandoned them? It's obvious they never truly cared for her. They're the ones who drove her away. Isn't it better for me to leave and make room for Pianran, since you both adore her so much? Having her take my place as the wife and mother of this household should be exactly what you wanted, He Yanting hurriedly explained. I only looked after Pianran because she was the sister of my deceased comrade-in-arms, on his deathbed. He specifically asked me to take care of his sister for him, and I agreed. I have absolutely no other feelings for her. After you left, I also found out that Pianran had been framing you all along. I've already had her imprisoned. She's involved in sabotaging a military marriage and attempted murder. She'll never get out. Song Xingyue was stunned. In all her life, she never knew that Pianran and He Yanting had this kind of connection. He Yanting, thinking she was wavering, continued to persuade her. Xingyue, we've realized our mistake. Please come back. If you want to keep flying, I'll request a transfer to Beijing. We can start a new life there as a family. Zhou also looked at her with an expectant expression. Song Xingyue simply shook her head, shattering their last shred of hope. I've already let go of you all. To me, you're nothing more than familiar strangers at best. I don't want to see any of you again. With that, Song Xingyue turned and walked away. Only the 2 lonely figures, one large and one small, remained standing there. Zhou, feeling wronged, took hold of He Yanting's hand. Daddy, does mommy really not want us anymore? He Yanting's lips moved. He desperately wanted to tell his son that their mother would never abandon them, but a lump the size of a boulder seemed to be lodged in his throat, rendering him utterly speechless. To avoid running into He Yanting and his son again, Song Xian you confined her daily routine to a strict 2-point route between the dormitory and the training ground. During training, she often felt the heat of 2 intense gazes upon her, but she pretended not to notice. On the day of the official drill, Song Xingyue, dressed in blue and holding her helmet in her left hand, walked out of the barracks with solemn purpose. This was more than just a drill. It was the moment their superiors would assess the results of their 3 years of training. She was determined to perform to the best of her ability. Just as I stepped out of the dormitory building, I saw He Yanting and his father waiting there. Song Xingyue kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, intending to walk right past, but He Yanting called out to stop her. Xingyue, I'm sorry. Song Xingyue looked at him with an inscrutable expression. A bitter smile tugged at He Yanting's lips as he spoke with difficulty. Last night, I had a dream. I dreamt that I had brought Pianran to the South China Sea as originally planned, while you and Zhou stayed behind at the compound. But I broke my promise to come for you, condemning you to a life of hardship, and even when I received the August 1st medal, I never mentioned your name, only thanking Pianran. By the end, He Yanting's eyes were rimmed with red. At first, he didn't believe in things like past lives or reincarnation, but after last night's dream, and connecting it to Song Xinyue's departure, he realized she must have had the same dream. That was why she chose to divorce him, to change her own fate. When He Yanting saw Song Xinyue again, he was determined to apologize to her and seek her forgiveness for both himself and his son, no matter how long it took. He couldn't bear the thought of being separated from Song Xinyue again, yet. When he awoke this morning, the image of Song Xinyue's eyes, filled with bitter resentment just before her death in his dream, kept replaying in his mind, sending sharp, stabbing pains through his heart. So it was true, he and his son had truly ruined her life. How could he possibly have the nerve to keep pestering her? Song Xingyue never expected He Yanting to have learned about their past life, but it was far too late now. In this life, she had already changed her own destiny. She had no need for his belated remorse. Now that you know, stop pestering me. To me, you and your father are the butchers who killed me. He Yanting's face paled, but he had no retort. Though Zhozhou was young, after hearing He Yanting's account, he understood the unforgivable nature of his past mistake. With red-rimmed eyes, he lowered his head, unable to meet Song Xinyue's gaze. As the assembly time was approaching, Song Xinyue paid the father and son no further mind and walked past them. Upon arriving at the exercise site, Song Xinyue expertly boarded her aircraft, fastened her harness, and donned her helmet, number 2568, ready for action. At the commander's signal, over 100 fighter jets roared into the sky. They streaked across the heavens, leaving long contrails in their wake. He Yanting held Zhozhou's hand, gazing into the distance. Zhozhou stared intently at the shadow streaking across the sky and couldn't help but speak up. Dad, after this drill is over, will Mom have to leave? He Yanting patted his head. Mom is pursuing her own dreams and career now. We can't keep holding her back. The day after the exercise concluded, the pilots from the capital city began their journey back. He Yanting and his father didn't go to see Song Xinyue off. Instead, they watched from a distance as she flew away in her fighter jet, committing its tail number firmly to memory. Many years later, Zhozhou had already been admitted to university and left Holudio. He Yanting remained steadfast at his post on the coastal defense line, yet, whenever he heard the roar of a plane overhead, he would instinctively look up, hoping to see the flight number he had repeated in his heart 1,000 times, for he knew that, in those moments, he was likely as close to Song Xinyue as he would ever be for the rest of his life. Story 2. At the age of 42, I saw my husband, Chen Buqiang, who had been dead for 20 years, on television. He had become a high-profile returnee talent, a renowned medical doctoral supervisor. I looked at my in-laws in shock, yet, I saw them beaming with pride, murmuring about the Chen family ancestors bestowing their blessings and their son bringing honor to the family lineage. Confronted with my questioning, my in-laws became even more self-righteous. If we hadn't lied to keep you here, who would take care of us in our old age? How could Buqiang have left the country with peace of mind? Within days, Chen Buqiang, along with his wife and children from abroad, drove me out of the house. Xiao Peilan, you old hag, you're not worthy of me anymore. In a fit of rage, I lashed out, only for them to join forces, push me down the stairs, and stage it as a tragic accident. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in 1980. This time, let Chen Buqiang take care of his own mother, crippled in her right leg, and his father, who suffers from uremia. I'm going abroad to study, so I can contribute to the advancement of our nation's medical industry. Peilan, let me take your study abroad application to Professor Zhang for you. The folder suddenly felt lighter in my hand. I looked up at Chen Buqiang's youthful face and froze in place. Seeing me dazed, he gently tapped my nose with his finger, his voice soft. Stop daydreaming, go get your documents later. We have to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau this afternoon to get our marriage license. His words made me realize I had been reborn. I was back in 1980. A wave of humiliation and disgust washed over me. I roughly wiped the tip of my nose. Even the skin he had touched felt filthy. I snatched my application form back from his hand. No need, I'll submit it myself. Chen Buqiang and I were university classmates, the academic power couple in everyone's eyes. We were both in the clinical medicine program, though I was the top student, ranking first in our major. He could never beat me in exams, always the eternal runner-up. Seeing my sudden change in attitude, a flicker of panic flashed in Chen Buqiang's eyes, and he grabbed my hand, refusing to let go. Why are you getting upset out of nowhere? I have to go to the school anyway, so I can drop it off for you on the way. Saves you a pointless trip. His words instantly made me suspicious. In my past life, he was the one who submitted the application for me, but when the study abroad shortlist came out, my name was nowhere to be found. His was on it instead. There was only one spot available in our program. The only way it could go to Chen Buqiang was if I gave it up. But before I could even confront him about it, my in-laws came to me in tears, saying he had died in a car accident, on his way to buy flowers for me. My heart was consumed by immense grief and deep guilt. My in-laws' health was already poor, and after that, it deteriorated completely. I had no choice but to give up my career to stay home and care for them with all my devotion. And in the end, it all turned out to be nothing but a lie, a deception aimed squarely at me. At that thought, I wrenched my hand from his grasp. No, I'll only feel at ease if I hand it to Professor Zhang myself. Seeing how stubborn I was, he grew agitated. Xiao Peilan, what are you implying? Do you think I'd do something to hurt you? If that's really what you think of me, then let's break up. We won't get our marriage license today either. But I completely ignored him. I turned and walked towards the school without a backward glance. Behind me, Chen Buqiang was so angry he slammed the door. When I got to the school and handed my application to Professor Zhang, I saw another one on the desk with Chen Buqiang's name on it. Noticing my gaze, Professor Zhang began to speak. A few days ago, Chen Buqiang came to submit his application. He mentioned you two are getting married and that you plan to stay behind to care for his parents. I thought it was a real shame at the time. For your medical skills to go to waste would have been a significant loss to our country's medical community. It's a relief you've changed your mind, suppressing the anger in my heart. I gave Professor Zhang my assurance. Professor Zhang, I never had any intention of giving up on medical research. I'm definitely going on this state-sponsored study abroad program. Besides, Chen Buqiang and I have broken up. Nothing can hold me back now. A hint of relief and satisfaction appeared on Professor Zhang's face. Peilan, you are the most outstanding student I have ever taught. I believe in you. After leaving school, I went to the cemetery to visit my parents. My parents were both brilliant doctors. The new drugs they developed advanced our country's medical science, but this also made them targets of persecution by a hostile nation. They died in a plane crash. I vowed to carry on their legacy and dedicate myself to serving our nation's healthcare system. As I walked home, I felt unusually lighthearted and found myself humming a little tune. Just as I reached my doorstep, I saw Chen Buqiang glaring at me, his face full of anger. Xiao Peilan, do you have any idea how long I waited for you outside the Civil Affairs Bureau this afternoon? I looked him up and down and said with a laugh, didn't you say we were over? What are you still doing waiting at the Civil Affairs Bureau? A flash of shock crossed Chen Buqiang's eyes, his face flushing crimson with anger. Fine, just fine, Xiao Peilan, you've really outdone yourself. Don't you dare regret this, even if you beg me on your knees. I won't marry you. I rolled my eyes. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I watched Chen Buqiang's retreating back with a cold sneer on my face. I'm going to enjoy watching how he plans to turn his life around in this lifetime, with me taking the overseas opportunity first, leaving him with no spot, and him being saddled with his sick and disabled in-laws. The next afternoon, I got a message from Professor Zhang saying my study abroad application had been approved. And I needed to go to the school to fill out some additional paperwork. I had just finished the forms and stepped out of the office when I ran into Chen Buqiang and Shinli from the anesthesiology program. They were walking arm in arm, looking incredibly close. I recognized Shinli. In my past life, she had gone abroad to study in the same cohort as Chen Buqiang. They got married and had children abroad, and their return home became a heartwarming story. It was also she who urged Chen Buqiang to kick me out of the house. Who would have thought that this despicable pair would end up together earlier in this lifetime, all because of me? Seeing me look at them, Chen Buqiang let out a cold sneer. Xiao Peilan, I'm with Lily now. My parents have accepted her as their daughter-in-law. From now on, we're strangers. It's too late for regrets. I gave a calm nod and walked past them without hurry. It was Shinli who suddenly spoke to me. Xiao Peilan, I'm about to register our marriage with Brother Buqiang. You'd better stay away from him. I turned to meet her gaze, a knowing smile playing on my lips. Congratulations on getting a head start in the sea of misery. Xiao Peilan, what on earth are you talking about? Chen Buqiang, furious and flustered, roared at me. A woman with a temper as foul as yours deserves to be alone. Get out of my sight. I simply smiled faintly and chose not to argue with him. This only infuriated him further. Even as I walked away, I could faintly hear his curses. I thought that in this life, Shinli was destined to follow the same path as my past self. She married Chen Buqiang, only for him to steal her opportunity to study abroad, forcing her to stay behind and care for his parents. To everyone's surprise, just 3 days later, she and Chen Buqiang were already in a public shouting match, pulling at each other on the street. Shinli came from a wealthy family, accustomed to a life of luxury since childhood and utterly incapable of enduring any hardship. Yet, Chen Buqiang and his parents naively believed Shinli was just like me. They could easily control and manipulate her. On the very day Shinli followed Chen Buqiang home, his mother ordered her to help wipe her body and even made her get up in the middle of the night to empty the bedpan. Chen Buqiang's father was even worse. He demanded Shinli hand wash his undergarments. And because he was ill and in a foul mood, he would frequently hurl abuse at her. In their eyes, Being chosen by Chen Buqiang was a blessing for Xinli. Xinli laid out all her grievances in front of everyone, completely ruining Chen Buqiang's reputation. With parents like that, no girl in her right mind would marry into that family and suffer. But Chen Buqiang was in a hurry to go abroad, and he was bound to find some poor soul to take care of his parents for him. That day, I was reviewing my English in the library when Chen Buqiang sought me out. Peilon, I was wrong before. I only got close to Xinli to make you jealous. Let's get back together. I put down the book in my hands and walked out of the library with him. Chen Buqiang, do you take me for a fool? Xinli didn't want to marry you and suffer a hard life, so why on earth would you think I would? A flash of viciousness crossed Chen Buqiang's eyes, but it was quickly concealed. He looked at me with a faint expression of deep affection. Peilon, how could I bear to let you suffer? Aren't you going abroad to study? I'll stay home and take good care of mom and dad. I'll work hard and wait for you to return after completing your studies successfully. I looked at him coldly. I had heard these hypocritical words in my past life. I believed those words, and my heart ached at the thought of him struggling alone in the future. So, before going abroad, I went to great lengths to care for his parents, trying to share his burden. In the end, his whole family conspired against me. They stole my study abroad opportunity and turned me into a slave in their household. Finally, they joined forces and murdered me. I took a deep breath, suppressing the urge to kill him, a bitter, mocking smile curling at the corner of my mouth. By the time I come back from abroad with a doctorate, you'll just be a regular employee. You won't be good enough for me anymore. Chen Buqiang's face changed, his voice trembling with anger. Xiao Peilon, I never thought you were such a shallow, materialistic woman. I was wrong about you. You really think you'll get to go abroad that easily? Let me tell you, it's not going to happen. After delivering that parting shot, he left. Yet, his words left me with a vague sense of unease. I had been keeping a close eye on the university's study abroad program. Only after confirming my name was still on the list did I finally breathe a quiet sigh of relief. However, 1 week before my departure, Professor Zhang came knocking on my door in a frantic hurry. Peilon, we have a problem. Someone has filed a formal, named report accusing you of plagiarism in your thesis. This morning, the department established a special task force to investigate. In the meeting, they said they're going to revoke your government-sponsored study abroad placement. I was startled at first, but then a look of understanding dawned in my eyes. Professor, the person who reported me, it's Chen Buqiang, isn't it? Professor Zhang spoke cautiously, as if afraid I might be hurt. Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding between you. Why don't you go and talk to him yourself? I shook my head and, taking Professor Zhang's hand to reassure him, said, there's no misunderstanding. He did it on purpose. Don't worry, Professor, I have evidence to clear my name. When I arrived at the school, besides the investigation team, Chen Buqiang, the one who filed the report, was also present. Upon seeing me, he put on an act of rage and shouted at me, Xiao Peilon, you're a fraud, you don't deserve that top ranking, you even stole my data for your thesis. What gives you the right to receive a national scholarship to study abroad, without so much as a glance in his direction? I handed the evidence over to the investigation team. This is the evidence proving I did not plagiarize. Please review it. When I was in a relationship with Chen Buqiang, I held nothing back from him. All the data for my thesis was open to him, but he didn't know I have a habit of keeping records. I have backups of all the primary source materials for the paper. My composure seemed to fluster Chen Buqiang. Don't think your forged evidence will fool the investigation team. I offered a faint, knowing smile. Justice resides in the hearts of the people. An hour later, Chen Buqiang was summoned into the office by a stern-faced teacher from the investigation panel. In the end, he was publicly reprimanded by the school for making a false report. My government-sponsored study abroad placement was ultimately secured. I only found out later that because of this reprimand, Chen Buqiang even lost the hospital job offer he had already secured. That night, Chen Buqiang was dead drunk, pounding on my door and shouting, Xiao Peilon, let me tell you, if it weren't for the spot, I'd never have gotten together with a tomboy like you. What gives you the right to dump me? Who else would even want you? You're just a woman. In the end, you'll have to go back to the family, be a good wife and mother. What's the point of competing with me? My fist clenched tighter. So Chen Buqiang never thought much of me. No wonder he was so cruel to me in my past life. He kept yelling and screaming, causing the neighbors to open their doors and call for me to come deal with him. I grabbed the chamber pot from the room, opened the door, and flung its contents right into his face. Chen Buqiang's drunkenness vanished instantly. He wiped his face and brought his hand to his nose, immediately retching, Xiao Peilon, how dare you throw piss on me? I raised the chamber pot in my other hand and threatened, if you don't leave now, I'll throw shit at you. When I raised the filth in my hand, he scrambled away in a blind panic. "You're insane, a complete lunatic." Early the next morning, as I was cycling to the library, Chen Buqiang's parents intercepted me at the crossroads. His mother, dragging her crippled right leg, thrust a death certificate in front of my eyes. "Peilon, something terrible has happened to Buqiang. He was hit by a car and killed." His father grabbed me directly, almost making me fall off my bicycle. "He went out to find you and apologize. You're the reason he's dead." I never imagined that in this life, Chen Buqiang would try to trap me again with a faked death. The two of them had a death grip on my arms. Buqiang kept calling your name with his dying breath. "Are you really so heartless that you won't even go see him?" Since Chen Buqiang went to all the trouble of setting up this little show for me, I couldn't very well disappoint him. This time, however, I didn't come alone. I not only brought along my classmates from school, but I also hired a funeral procession for the occasion. Seeing so many of us, his mother grew flustered. "Peilon, you surely can't bear to see him cremated. We'll handle the funeral arrangements after you've left." I shook my head. Since he couldn't let go of me, it's all the more reason for me to see him off on his final journey. I turned my gaze to the funeral procession. "I leave it in your hands," as the words fell. Under the stunned gaze of his parents, the funeral staff stepped forward and lit the dry grass beneath Chen Buqiang. The flames shot up, instantly engulfing the entire field of dry grass. Chen Buqiang came screaming out of the fire. "It's a walking corpse." Ah! Chaos erupted on the scene, with screams ringing out one after another. Fortunately, someone reacted quickly, grabbing a piece of clothing to smother the flames on Chen Buqiang. Everyone rushed to get Chen Buqiang to the hospital. Meanwhile, Shenli took advantage of the confusion and ran back home. At the entrance to the operating room, Chen Buqiang's mother was weeping inconsolably. She glared at me, her words dripping with venom. "Xiao Peilon, if anything happens to my son, I swear I will make you pay." My poor boy, how could he have fallen for such a heartless woman? His father slammed his fist into the hospital wall, his eyes blazing with murderous intent, as if he wanted to kill me on the spot. But I just calmly pulled Chen Buqiang's death certificate out of my pocket. "So, Chen Buqiang isn't dead at all, yet you claimed he was. This death certificate even bears the official hospital seal. So which is it? Are you lying, or did the hospital make a mistake?" "Auntie, uncle, if you forged this death certificate, you could end up in jail." Upon hearing this, the sorrowful expression on Chen Buqiang's mother's face froze, a flicker of guilt flashing in her eyes. "How could it be fake? This is what the hospital gave us." "We're not lying," I nodded, then exclaimed dramatically, "Good heavens, this hospital actually diagnosed a perfectly healthy, living person as dead. Who knows how many other innocent people have been misdiagnosed before this? Could they have misdiagnosed something else? Who would dare come to such a heartless hospital?" The moment I finished speaking, the patient's family members turned pale with fright, clamoring to get their money back and transfer to another hospital. This commotion alerted the hospital director. In the dean's office, the dean held Chen Buqiang's death certificate in his hand, his brow furrowed tightly. "This stamp is indeed from our hospital. Find out immediately who issued this document. Please rest assured, I will certainly provide a satisfactory explanation to the patient and the patient's family, soon." A doctor named Shen Dezhong was summoned into the room. Looking closer, I realized this man was Shenli's father. It didn't take a genius to figure out Shenli must have been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. I just never imagined that the death certificate from my past life was also Shenli's doing. The moment Shen Dezhong saw that forged death certificate, he immediately confessed to everything. He begged the hospital director for another chance, completely unaware that the police were already walking through the door. Shen Dezhong was taken away by the police on suspicion of a major medical malpractice incident. Before leaving, he shouted at Chen Buqiang's parents, "Chen Buqiang made me forge this. His accident has nothing to do with me. You can't treat me like this." Chen Buqiang's parents turned their heads away, pretending not to hear. Before long, Shenli rushed to the hospital. After learning her father had been taken away by the police, she glared at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Xiao Peilon, look what you've done. Because of you, Brother Buqiang is lying in the operating room fighting for his life, and you got my father arrested. Are you happy now, after ruining everyone's lives?" I stood with my arms crossed, looking at her. "What does any of this have to do with me? I didn't force your father to forge those documents. What good would Chen Buqiang faking his death do for me? You have no one to blame but your own foolishness. Was it worth betraying your own father for a man?" Shenli's face turned deathly pale, her voice trembling. "You knew he was faking his death. You knew it from the very beginning, yet you still gave the order to light the fire." I let out a scornful laugh, moving closer to her, and spoke in a voice meant only for her ears. What a shame he didn't burn to death. Shinli recoiled sharply, staring at me as if I were a monster. You're insane, Xia Peilan. You're a complete lunatic. I just smiled and said nothing. I gave my all for half a lifetime, only to be betrayed and murdered by my own husband and family. How could I not go mad? If I hadn't kept my wits about me, Chen Buqiang would have been burned to death today. 3 hours later, Chen Buqiang was wheeled out of the operating room. The doctor said it was fortunate Chen Buqiang was brought in promptly, but his entire face was burned beyond recognition, completely disfigured. The rest of his body, however, only sustained minor burns. Upon hearing the news, Chen Buqiang's mother fainted from crying. His father stood outside the hospital room, chain-smoking without pause. Inside the ward, Chen Buqiang went berserk the moment he regained consciousness. Didn't I tell you to keep an eye on my body? Why did you just stand there and watch her set it on fire? Look at me. I'm a wreck, neither man nor ghost. How am I supposed to live like this? I already lost my job, and now this is the final nail in the coffin. Where is Shinli? She's the one who gave me the anesthetic. Where is she? I had such a bright future ahead of me, and you people destroyed my dreams. You all deserve to die. Chen Buqiang yelled at his parents until they left the hospital room. Hearing him scream in agony and madness from the room filled me with immense satisfaction. At that moment, Shinli carefully pushed open the hospital room door and stepped inside. Brother Buqiang, my father has been arrested by the police for helping you forge that death certificate. Could you please come forward and clear my father's name? Just tell them you orchestrated the whole thing yourself. Why should I clear his name? If he had stuck to his professional ethics in the first place, none of this would have happened to me. He's just as responsible for the state I'm in. Chen Buqiang's voice was especially vicious. Chen Buqiang, you were the one begging my father. Before Shinli could finish, the sound of shattering glass and a woman's scream echoed through the hospital room. In the next instant, blood welled from Shinli's forehead. Chen Buqiang watched her with a cold, disdainful gaze. Shinli, don't think for a second that just because I'm down, you'll get off scot-free. Your father's already been taken in by the police, with that stain on your record. Do you really think you'll still get to study abroad? Shinli pressed a hand to her forehead, her eyes wide with disbelief. Chen Buqiang, what are you trying to say? Chen Buqiang looked at her. Gone was the deep affection and tenderness of the past, replaced now by nothing but hatred. You people are the reason I'm in this state. How dare any of you think you can just move on with your lives? I will absolutely not step forward to clear your father's name. With that, Shinli covered her face and ran out of the hospital room, sobbing. Seeing Chen Buqiang like this came as no surprise to me. At his core, he's a selfish person. His life is ruined, so he wants to drag everyone around him down to hell with him. I pushed the door open and entered, my tone icy. Chen Buqiang, if you're not as skilled as others, you should work harder, not resort to harming them. What isn't yours will never be yours. What good did playing dead do you? Look where it's gotten you now. Chen Buqiang saw me, his eyes red with fury. Xia Peilan, you did that on purpose. You were trying to kill me. I look completely innocent. You can eat your food, but you can't just say anything that comes to mind. Your parents are in poor health, and your family is poor. I spent my own money to hire a funeral team to handle your affairs. Wasn't that for your own good? Besides, if someone had told everyone you weren't dead back then, the funeral team wouldn't have lit the fire. If you want to blame anyone for this mess, blame yourself. Who did you entrust your life to? Don't you know the answer in your heart? Shinli and your parents were all there. Why didn't they stop it? At my words, his bloodshot eyes filled with pure hatred. Combined with the scars visible beneath the bandages, he looked like a demon straight out of hell. None of you will get away. You're all to blame for this. I watched Chen Buqiang with a cold, detached gaze. Ever since I came back from rebirth, I never intended to actively seek revenge against him. He was the one who set me up, time and time again. The predicament he's in now is entirely his own doing, a consequence of his insatiable greed. Just as I was about to leave, he suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm in a death grip. Xia Peilan, I don't care if it was intentional or not. You had someone set that fire, and you won't get away with it. I knew he would pull something like this. I wrenched his hand away and demanded, so what do you want? Chen Buqiang stared at me, his eyes filled with madness. I want you to voluntarily give up your study abroad spot to me. Then, you'll stay behind to take care of my parents. Slaving away from my family for the rest of your life. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Chen Buqiang, has your brain been fried too? Your current physical condition simply doesn't meet the national standards for government-sponsored study abroad. Even if I were willing, the school would never approve it, and why on earth should I agree to such an unreasonable demand of yours? With that, he picked up another glass from the table and hurled it at me. Xia Peilan, I sidestepped it with a light turn. Chen Buqiang, look at the state you're in, you should just focus on recovering. With that, I pushed the door open and left, ignoring his dark expression. The next day, Shinli came to the hospital again to see Chen Buqiang, hoping he would come forward to clarify the matter of the forged death certificate. Seeing he couldn't get anywhere with me, Chen Buqiang then set his sights on Shinli. He demanded that Shinli marry him, give up her spot to study abroad, and stay behind to take care of him and his parents. Shinli refused him on the spot. As a result, Chen Buqiang immediately went to the police station and demanded that Shin Dezhong be severely punished. After learning of this, Shinli had no choice but to seek out Chen Buqiang and agree to his demands. On the day they registered their marriage, Chen Buqiang went to the Civil Affairs Bureau in a wheelchair. It said that Shinli cried the entire time. The staff at the bureau nearly called the police on several occasions, suspecting she was being forced into the marriage. This infuriated Chen Buqiang. That very night, he beat Shinli with his cane. Thanks to Chen Buqiang's testimony, Shin Dezhong's sentence was significantly reduced. However, his medical license was still revoked, ending his career as a doctor for good. The hospital paid Chen Buqiang a substantial sum in compensation, yet, with one parent disabled and the other battling cancer, the family's expenses far exceeded their income. That money was nowhere near enough to support them for a lifetime. Moreover, the incident drove a wedge between Chen Buqiang and his parents, leading him to keep all the money under his sole control. There were just 2 days left before I was due to leave the country to study abroad. I was in the school library, reading a book. Suddenly, 2 police officers pushed the door open and walked straight over to where I was sitting. They flashed their badges and stared at me with stern expressions. Xiao Peilan, please come with us. You've been reported for intentional homicide. The previously quiet library erupted into a commotion. Everyone turned their gaze towards me, whispering amongst themselves, "Oh my God, isn't she the top student in the medical program? How could she be a murderer? Who knows? Weren't there rumors about her plagiarizing a paper not long ago?" I ignored the people gossiping, packed up my things, and followed the police. I knew without a second thought that Chen Buqiang was behind this. When I arrived at the police station, I saw Chen Buqiang and his parents sitting inside, waiting for me. Chen Buqiang looked at me with a smug expression. "Xiao Peilan, do you really think I can't handle you?" I ignored his provocation and instead looked at the police officer. "Officer, do they have any evidence to prove that my friend committed murder?" Before the officer could even open his mouth, Chen Buqiang's mother stood up in a fury, pointing an accusing finger at me. "Xiao Peilan, it was you who ordered someone to set my son on fire. Look at what you've done to his face. If they hadn't put the fire out in time, my son would be dead." Chen Buqiang glared at me. "What more is there for you to say? You're the one who hurt me. That's a fact. I just found it laughable. In my past life, I actually ruined my own life for the sake of this family." I didn't argue with them. Instead, I used the police station's phone to call over the classmates who were present that day and the head of the funeral team. I was always well liked in class and often helped my classmates. The funeral arrangements for Chen Buqiang were not carried forward, and I didn't ask the funeral team for a refund. They were all very willing to help me out. So, after they arrived, they all voluntarily gave statements on my behalf. "Officer, we only took on the job to handle his funeral arrangements that day because we had received Chen Buqiang's death certificate." That's right. We all saw it with our own eyes. Chen Buqiang's parents said he was dead. In their own words, exactly, that day, I saw Chen Buqiang's parents crying the hardest, talking about the tragedy of parents burying their own child. With each passing remark, Chen Buqiang's expression grew increasingly grim. The 2 police officers also furrowed their brows, glancing up from time to scrutinize Chen Buqiang and the other 2. Based on the testimonies, the police uncovered the case where Chen Buqiang and the hospital had forged a death certificate. Piecing together the full story, in the end, I was acquitted and released. As for Chen Buqiang and his parents, they were detained for a stern lecture and reprimand for filing a false police report. On the day of our departure, we all gathered at the school gate. Professor Zhang came to see me off personally. He patted my shoulder and said, "Peilan, your abilities go far beyond this. You will undoubtedly become an excellent doctor one day." Just then, Chen Buqiang appeared. Seeing Professor Zhang's hand on my shoulder, his expression said, "I knew it. So that's why you suddenly wanted to break up with me. You've been getting cozy with Professor Zhang, haven't you? You've already found yourself a better catch. I bet you got that government-sponsored study abroad spot through shady means too, didn't you? No wonder Professor Zhang tried to convince me to let you have the spot when I submitted my application. So that's what was going on." Seeing he was about to speak again, I rushed forward and slapped him hard across the face. "Chen Buqiang, you disgusting piece of trash. I put my full force into that slap. Blood instantly seeped through the bandages on his face, making for a truly gruesome sight. Chen Buqiang raised his hand to wipe his face and saw the blood staining his fingertips. He was stunned for a moment, then his anger flared. He raised his hand, ready to strike back. "Xiao Peilan, you bitch, you're asking for it." I didn't give him a chance. I kicked him right in the groin, and he immediately dropped to his knees, howling in agony. I looked down at him from my superior position. My relationship with Professor Zhang is completely above board. It's you who's guilty of academic misconduct. You lack the ability and still try to take shortcuts through underhanded means. If you keep doing things that harm others without benefiting yourself, the bad karma will eventually come back to haunt you. Shortly after, the school security guards arrived and dragged Chen Buqiang away. After saying goodbye to my former classmates one by one, my companions and I boarded the bus to the airport under our teacher's guidance. Once on the plane, I watched the land gradually shrink below. My heart gradually settled into a calm. "Xiao Peilan, your life is about to begin anew." Over these 6 years studying abroad, I felt like a completely different person, entirely unlike my previous life. I was no longer confined to the kitchen, no longer fretting over every last penny. I am fully dedicated to my medical research, as there is so much knowledge to acquire. I wish I could stretch a single day into a week to get more done. The faster I learn, the sooner I can bring this advanced medical knowledge back to my country and help more patients. Time is money. My homeland has invested in my education, and I am determined to repay that investment 100-fold. On the very day our research program ended, a foreign medical research institute approached us. They offered us a lucrative salary to stay and contribute to their country's medical research. It was then that I understood why, in my previous life, Chen Buqiang and Shenli didn't return to the country until 20 years later. It turned out they had long been lured by the high pay, betraying their original aspirations. I only decided to return home because the competition abroad was too fierce and I couldn't make it there anymore. It wasn't out of some genuine patriotic feeling. With that thought, I declined the offer without a moment's hesitation. Among the classmates who came to study abroad with me, a few succumbed to the temptation and chose to stay. I didn't try to persuade them. Everyone must be responsible for their own choices. The day I left to go back was a bright, sunny day. I was wearing a stylish floral dress, full of youthful energy. I first went to the university to meet with Professor Zhang and some old classmates. Professor Zhang had been promoted to vice president and had mentored countless students over the years. A few old classmates greeted me with warm, teasing banter. "Peilan, you used to dress so drab all the time. This outfit suits you much better. I saw your published research in the paper. That's so like you. If that medicine gets developed, it would really help a lot of people. Peilan just got back, and you're already talking about work. You're just like Chen Buqiang." "Oh. Why did you have to bring him up?" Hearing Chen Buqiang's name piqued my curiosity, and I asked, "It's fine, but what's up with Chen Buqiang?" My old classmate shook his head with a mysterious look. "A lot has happened in the 6 years you've been gone, especially with Chen Buqiang. It's like he's been possessed. For the first couple of years, he just lay around at home drinking all day. Then one day, he suddenly came to his senses, claiming it had all been a dream and that none of this was real. His parents, terrified, had him admitted to a psychiatric hospital. He was only there a few days before seeming normal again. After being discharged, he spent all his time in the school laboratory. He told the principal he could develop some kind of super effective cold medicine, but the principal couldn't be bothered with him. No one took it seriously at first, but to everyone's surprise, he actually succeeded. A research institute wanted to hire him, but he turned down their offer, deeming the salary too low, and went to work for a foreign company instead. Hearing those words, my heart skipped a beat, and a bold idea suddenly sprang to mind. Could it be that Chen Buqiang had also been reborn? To verify the answer in my heart, I bid farewell to my old classmates and made my way to Chen Buqiang's house. The once dilapidated house had been renovated into a 2-story Western-style villa. Just as I was standing at the door, a woman with disheveled hair and tattered clothes pushed the door open and emerged, her sallow face bruised and battered. She struggled to carry a slop bucket with both hands, staggering with each step. Immediately after, Chen Buqiang's mother came out and began shouting curses at the woman, pointing an accusing finger. "You're so slow and useless at every little task. What's the point of the Chen family keeping you around? So you can just laze about and eat for free all day. Watch it, or I'll have Buqiang throw you out of the house." I was taken aback. The woman standing before me was actually Shenli, so it wasn't personal. Anyone who married Chen Buqiang would end up as their slave, even Shenli, who was deeply in love with Chen Buqiang in her past life. Could not escape this fate, perhaps sensing my gaze, Shinli suddenly looked up at me, "Xia Peilan." Her voice was loud enough that Chen Buqiang, who was at home, heard it too. The next moment, Chen Buqiang came out and invited me in for a cup of coffee. I didn't refuse. The bandages had long been removed from Chen Buqiang's face, leaving only a large, horrifying scar that coiled across his skin like centipedes. Combined with his piercing gaze, he exuded an aura that was not to be trifled with. He placed the hot coffee in front of me and began to speak slowly, "Xia Peilan, you've been reborn too." I looked at him and did not deny it. Chen Buqiang smiled and continued, "Don't overthink it, I don't mean anything by it. You've probably already guessed that I've been reborn. I did hate you at first, but I've come to understand. In my past life, I stole your chance to study abroad and was even responsible for your death. It's only natural you'd want revenge, but in this life, even without going abroad, I can still live a life of luxury and success, all thanks to the memories from my past life. You've come back now as just a team member at a research institute. While I'm already a technical executive at a multinational corporation, my salary is untold times higher than yours. There's simply no way you can compare to me." Frankly, I couldn't care less about his affairs, but thinking of Shenli, whom I had just seen, I couldn't help but ask, "Since you've been reborn too, you must remember that Shenli was your lover in your past life. Why are you treating her this way?" Chen Buqiang looked at me with utter disdain in his eyes. "All you women ever think about is romance and love. In our past life, Shenli and I were both technical professionals. That's the kind of person who truly deserves to be my wife. Look at her now, a complete frump. I'd be embarrassed to be seen with her in public." Perhaps feeling a pang of sympathy for my former self, I couldn't help but speak up in Shenli's defense. "If you don't love her, you could divorce her and let her go. It was you who trapped her here, you who drove her to become what she is now. She could have been an excellent doctor, shining in her own field." Chen Buqiang snorted coldly, "Why would I let a free nanny go? With her taking care of my parents at home, I can focus on earning money for the family." "Xia Peilan, don't you dare lecture me. If you hadn't run away, you'd be the one stuck here right now. Come to think of it, you should thank Shenli. She's the one suffering in your place." Then he suddenly burst into loud laughter. "You're insane," I muttered under my breath. Seeing that I couldn't get through to him, I stood up to leave. The moment I stepped outside, I saw Shenli standing by the doorway. She walked me to the main gate. "Xia Peilan, thank you. Even after I helped Chen Buqiang harm you, you were still willing to speak up for me." Shenli, loving the wrong person isn't the tragedy. The real tragedy is letting that love become your prison. You have your whole life ahead of you. It's not too late for anything. As I finished speaking, I saw a tremor in her eyes. I had said all I could. What happened next was up to her. 3 days later, I saw Shenli in the newspaper. Shenli took Chen Buqiang to court, accusing him of domestic violence and treason. It turned out that over the years, Chen Buqiang had used illegal means to infiltrate the National Research Institute, stealing research data and selling it to foreign companies. With memories from his past life, he was intimately familiar with the institute. If Shenli hadn't come forward, no one would have ever found out. With the evidence being irrefutable, Chen Buqiang was convicted on the spot. Upon hearing the tragic news, Chen Buqiang's mother, unable to bear it, took her own life by hanging. His father subsequently drowned in a river after a drunken fall, having turned to heavy drinking in the days that followed. 5 years later, the research institute I work for has once again developed a breakthrough drug patented in our country. This medication does not rely on foreign technology, which has drastically reduced its cost, making it affordable and accessible for ordinary families to get the treatment they need. I visited my parents' grave and laid down a bouquet of chrysanthemums. "Mom, Dad, if you were still here, you'd be so proud of me."